Hello everyone, and welcome to the Precursive webinar looking at the state of customer onboarding and capacity. I trust you're all keeping well. I'm Robert Bennell from Precursive, and I'm delighted to welcome you all today to what's going to be a great conversation with some excellent insights that each of you can take away and apply to your daily working lives. We have over 300 people registered for this event, which shows a high level of interest in this topic. And we've got a nice variety of businesses on the line, from small and hyper-growth companies to mid-market and enterprise organizations, all attending from around the world. So welcome all. Just to get going, we'll be moving on to the introduction shortly, and the speakers today will be covering our research topics. We've been fortunate to have some of the world's best companies share with us how they approach customer success and drive it for their teams and customers alike. So we're excited to share those range of insights from our research programs, specifically into customer onboarding and capacity planning. And this will be framed around our anatomy of the world-class customer onboarding organization. I also just want to draw your attention that we will have a Q&A session at the end, and it's a really good chance for you all to get involved. On your Zoom dashboard, you should see a Q&A button, and that button will allow you to send questions to me, and I'll put those to Jonathan and Andy at the end of the session. Feel free to ask them throughout, but there'll also be some time at the end in order to do that. So let's move on to who's speaking today. Our speakers today are Adam Joseph from Gainsight, which is the leading customer success software, which helps many of the world's best companies increase revenue, reduce churn, and increase customer advocacy. Adam is the Director of Customer Success and will be providing some of the context for the webinar content today. And then we'll be moving on to two of our biggest people in Precursive, Jonthan Corrie, the CEO, and Andy Mahood, the CTO, who will be walking you through our separate research pieces, both into customer onboarding and capacity, as aforementioned. So without any further ado, over to Adam.
Hello, everyone. So, I'm Adam Joseph, the Director of Customer Success at Gainsight, and a self-confessed customer success nerd. I've also run my own podcast series. I blog extensively and try and share best practices about customer success. What Gainsight is all about is trying to forward and promote best practice use of customer success in all forms. And I'm delighted to join you today and talking about some of the themes and why customer success is so important. So I'm sure some of you on today's call might have come across Gainsight previously. So we're a platform. Not only do we now run on Salesforce, but also as an independent platform. And we're really there to drive the insights and workflow of customer success managers and enable executives across the business to try and understand the health or otherwise of their customer base and drive actions accordingly. So that's just a brief intro into Gainsight, but let's talk more generally about customer success as a whole. And see, look, there's absolutely no doubt that SaaS, or software as a service, has had a truly transformative approach to how companies now work with their customers. If you think about the old days of the transaction economy, all of the risk was with the buyer. You know, they had to pay a large upfront fee for sometimes perpetual access to their chosen solution. And aside from, I guess, goodwill, there was no real motivation, financial or otherwise, for that company to keep close to their customers throughout their lifetime with them. However, in today's subscription economy, it's almost completely different. Providing proactive resources to help your customers achieve value, but it's not just a nice to have, it's critical to the future viability of your company. Now, that proactive resource and the workflows and processes behind it is what we typically call customer success. Now, customer success is all about loyalty, right? Every company wants loyal customers. And what do loyal customers do? They're going to continually renew and they're going to grow their relationships with you. And not only that, they're going to advocate to others about why they should work with you as well. Now, customer acquisition by comparison is extremely expensive, potentially up to 10 to 25 times the cost of keeping your existing customers. So you can't out-acquire a high churn rate. It makes sense, therefore, to invest in customer success, and especially when you're launching new customers with the aim of helping them see value from your product as quickly as possible. I guess the question is, how should you do it, and what can we learn from some of the world's most innovative and success-led organizations who have already done it? Well, I'm thrilled to say that's what we're going to be talking about today. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Thanks, Adam. Actually, it's Jonathan here. Hello, everyone. I'm going to take this. Thanks again to all of you for joining us. At Precursive, we help a range of technology and services companies to scale by helping them improve their customer onboarding and capacity planning. This slide just gives a quick overview of some of the things that we do. As a company, though, we face many of the same challenges as everyone on the call today. So as we look to grow our business and provide great outcomes for our customers, we're facing a number of the issues that many of you guys on the phone will also deal with in your daily lives. We offer multiple products that are used across different industries. We serve both SMB customers all the way through to enterprise clients. When we were a startup, I was the salesperson, the CSM, the onboarding manager, all rolled into one. So I've also dealt firsthand with many of the issues that we all face today. We use our products internally, and so this has helped us to scale, and hence some of the insights that we will share with you today are born out of our own experience. I'm delighted to be joined by Andy, our co-founder and CTO, and I'm going to hand over to him to talk about some of the insights from our research.
Thanks, Jonathan, and hi everyone, thanks for joining. So I'm Andy Mahood, and I'm excited to be part of what I think is a really powerful conversation on customer onboarding and capacity. We are running our annual customer onboarding benchmark survey for the last 3 years. This is the most comprehensive study into customer onboarding anywhere, with more than 200 of the world's best and brightest companies participating and sharing their insight. So in 2019, we expected to learn how companies were collaborating with customers and how they were using technology to support them scale, and how onboarding teams were using metrics to drive their decisions. However, when we actually came to analyze the results, what came in from the industry, it was very apparent that there was a different, bigger story that needed to be told. What we found was quite a large maturity gap. And this maturity gap wasn't only between the largest and smallest companies, but also between the very fastest growing companies and similar sized companies. In the report, we defined this cohort as hypergrowth. Ultimately, we found that hypergrowth companies are leading the customer onboarding industry because they have to. They are onboarding a lot of customers really fast. However, even though the rest of us might not have access to the same capital as these hypergrowth companies, we can all learn from their mindset, their practices, and the processes that these businesses have put in place. So I'm going to share some insight from the research, as well as some practical recommendations from the team and I at Precursive on how you can each commit to putting that initial rapid customer success at the heart of your strategy and culture, just like these hypergrowth companies have. So from the research, each cohort helps us to understand how companies at different stages of growth approach customer onboarding. Your company will naturally fit into one of these 4 cohorts. We compared each data point between these 4 cohorts of customers to help compare the behavior, process, and technology with similar companies. We found that the enterprise cohort still leads the way when it comes to maturity of their onboarding approach. So remember, we're not stating this maturity is equal to quality. Maturity score is calculated by aggregating certain data points, like evidence of having a dedicated team for onboarding, or how they're measuring the completion of their onboarding process, through to the standardization of process, and also the technology that's being used to manage onboarding within their organization. Now, whilst it is true that hypergrowth companies do have greater access to capital, as stated, what we've found to be at the heart of their success is putting that initial rapid customer success at the heart of their strategy and culture.
So hi everyone, it's Robert here again. So thanks Andy for that. That was really interesting, learning how we're shaped by not just the size of our company, but where we are actually in our customer onboarding process. But now we're going to turn to what does good look like and how people can actually apply some of these things to their own world. The context, the framework that we're building around today's conversation is around the anatomy of a world-class customer onboarding team. So this will help unpack some of the key elements, again, drawing from some of the insights from the research. So part 1 actually starts with people and culture. And back to you, Andy.
So let's have a look at what the data actually shows. Well, larger enterprises are running the biggest customer success departments, with 60% numbering over 30 people. As you would expect, early stage companies are typically operating the smallest CS teams with less than 3 people. In comparison, hyper-growth teams are most likely between 3 and 30. Our interpretation is that organizations characterized by this rapid growth model are investing in building larger customer success departments than the slower growing counterparts. So if you're underinvesting in the team or overstretching your sales capacity to help your customers see success, this is going to have a negative impact on your growth. So regardless of your team size, having a truly customer success orientated culture is a company-wide thing, and it's not simply for the customer success team to worry about. Your marketing, sales, products, engineering, and operations all need to buy in, mean it, and be involved in ensuring that this culture sticks and scales within the organization. We also see that specialism is increasing within customer success. And let's turn to that now. So let's have a look. So what we see is that 55% of enterprise businesses have a dedicated onboarding team, compared with just 35% of early stage businesses. Early stage businesses may not have the scale to dedicate these resources solely to customer onboarding, and it's likely that the team members will cover a number of different functions rather than specializing. However, what is clear is that the companies with a dedicated customer onboarding team are reporting higher satisfaction with their process. So those companies that are separating that function out are seeing the rewards from that. Our experience is that separating CS from onboarding teams allows for specialization and ultimately better customer outcomes. And it plays an important part in the journey to onboarding maturity. So regardless of whether you have dedicated approach to customer onboarding at present, or you have a team that specializes, our key message to you is to start focusing on the first 90 days and don't obsess over the last 90 days. The longer term value of starting well is significantly higher rather than trying to fix it when it's actually gone wrong. So our belief here at Precursive is that industry-focused knowledge will only increase in importance to customers who look to you to become partners rather than just another vendor.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point, right, Andy? I mean, I think it's really interesting to see how that data's developed, how your survey's developed over the years, because I think, what we've covered so far in this call is, okay, who have we surveyed in this overall research program? What is the breakdown of that group by company size and type? Where are they sitting in terms of maturity? How are those companies sizing their teams, and why is that specialization driving success? So yeah, super interesting stuff. I mean, what we look to do here is share some things to think about as you look to invest in your people and culture. So to begin with, what do we mean by not faking it? Well, simply put, culture isn't words on a page or a website. Just because you've written it down doesn't make it true. Culture is something that really evolves, and it's an individual or organizational muscle that has to be nurtured and worked on over time. If customer success is a core value, it's going to shine through in every interaction that you have internally and with clients, because they'll be at the heart of the conversation and doing right by them. Culture very much starts at the top. Not all of us might have access to the CEO, but I guarantee you that they care about customer advocacy because they know it drives growth. So figure out smart ways to put this on their radar. Back in my career, I once emailed our CEO at the time highlighting the great job that one of our delivery team had done, and included the email I got from the customer. CEOs love to hear this stuff, and tying that to what you're doing in customer success and customer onboarding should get you on their radar. Thirdly here, building business acumen in your team is critical. Or to put it another way, customer acumen, right? So that's a clear understanding of your customer's industry, their business, their company, the function that they sit in and their role, right? Those are the four lenses of that customer acumen. And ideally, you need to be able, you need your staff to be able to articulate some of those industry trends, how these will impact your customer, what their function does and is on the hook for, and then finally the scope of their role. Now, coaching it's critical to building this acumen. And coaching is hard. I mean, some people think they're good coaches when all they do is actually tell people what to do. So don't fall into that trap. And don't also fall into the trap of thinking that process is coaching. It isn't. Coaching is helping your team to learn something new more quickly and better than they would have done on their own. And importantly, so that they retain that information and learn. Okay, fifth one down here, learn how and when to say no. Well, no is an awkward word sometimes, but learning how to say no is really important. Customer success is not built on saying yes to every request. That's a slippery slope into free professional services. When you do say no, frame it the right way. Look, you fully appreciate the reasons for a request and the reasons behind it, but unfortunately you can't do something at present because, and actually say no, explain the reasons why, and because is a powerful word to emphasize in that conversation with the client and the reasons behind it. Finally, particularly in the current environment, investing in stuff that's going to bind your culture together. I love the word bind. As companies get bigger, naturally they pull apart. So let's make smart investments that allow you to work together more quickly. And again, in the current backdrop of the global health crisis at the moment and the rising remote working that's resulting over the coming months, this unfortunately has never been more true.
Thanks, Jonathan. So now we're going to move on to part 2 of our anatomy, which is around playbooks. So in this section, we want to share what is a playbook and what does that mean in the terms of customer success, how do you build them, and what is the impact when you actually use them and switch over to a playbook-led style within your organization. So back to Andy.
Thanks, Robbie. So lesson 1 of presentations is don't read off the page, but I'm going to break that rule for now. So customer onboarding playbooks are scalable, repeatable, and profitable ways to onboard your customers, right? That's what it is to us. So let's break this down. Let's break this definition down a little bit. So we can, firstly, what do we mean by this? And also we can kind of explain some of these things that are actually not considered playbooks. So first, scalable. As you think about how to bring playbooks into your customer onboarding approach, or if you have them already and you want to refine your playbooks or your process and make them better, you need to think about how you design and build these playbooks to scale. So the overall purpose of any good playbook is to help your people scale their time, help your processes to scale, and help your company to scale. A simple way to pressure test your playbook is to just ask yourself, if we were to double our volume of work, would our playbook still make sense? If the answer is no, then you've probably got to go back and do some work. Because as a scaling business, you need to be making sure you're ahead of that curve. So next is repeatable. So repeatability and scale are two sides of the same coin and directly influence one another. So in achieving repeatability, you can do the same thing again and again and again and again and again and again. The world's best sports people know the value of practice and technique and spend time on focusing how they will react under moments of extreme pressure and stress, like at match point. World-class customer onboarding needs world-class playbooks that have been honed, refined, and practiced in multiple scenarios. In particular, do they hold up to moments of stress, like when you and your team are very stretched for time? And the most controversial part of this definition is profitable, and deliberately so. So we're looking to convey the message that if the way that you set up your customers costs you a lot of money, then as you scale and grow, that cost will only exponentially increase and may not be sustainable. This is why efficiency is so important. The best playbooks are designed to make onboarding a smooth and efficient process, an effortless experience for the customers, if you will. So finally, let's just explain what a playbook is not. So a playbook is not a customized project plan that you build every single time. A playbook is not starting from scratch. A playbook is not really, really expensive. These are all the things that you want to avoid. So at Precursive, we've put together our top 10 recommendations to help you build out your own customer onboarding playbooks. Many of our customers have introduced these principles and seen the right kind of improvements, consistency, and scaling potential. So right at the top, number one is keep it simple. In the words of one of our customers, work is complicated enough. Let's not overcomplicate things. Include the minimum number of steps and activities that help you and your team work at pace, onboard customers smoothly, and ensure that you and your customer know what's going on. So number two is focus on the 80%. So this is kind of continuing in for number one, really. Concentrate on the work that you have to deliver time and time again. Your bread and butter. Make sure that this runs as smoothly as possible, because that's what you'll be doing most of the time. If the most common works run smoothly, then you'll get time back to explore how you can better deal with, the more complex outlier type work that crops up. So customer facing and interactive. Now, a common reason for delay in customer onboarding is in fact the customer. Okay, so everyone on this call probably recognizes this. It's like our delivery is highly dependent on the customer. Either you don't get what you need, or you don't get it when you need it, or the customer didn't know they were supposed to be providing you with something when in fact you told them, but they hadn't noticed, or they thought that you were going to tell them again. Whatever it might be. More and more we see that the best onboarding teams are being able to share what the plan looks like early in the process, along with key milestones and potential blockers. Having a plan is one thing, but then having a plan that you can share with the customer, now this helps you to reduce this risk and educate them earlier on in the process about when they're going to be needed and how much time is needed of them. And it's small things like this that can have a massive impact on the delivery of your process. Along with this, kickoff is key. So our research found that kickoff has the most meaningful impact on onboarding success. So one key tip is don't show up to that first meeting and say, so why did you buy it? Why did you buy us? Or what are your requirements? What are you trying to do? What are your objectives? This information must form part of the handover from sales. Like this should have really come up in the sales conversation. And you should be going into that meeting with the ability to summarize the requirements and the impacts of the challenges and the goals that they want to see. Now, you don't want to do all the talking, but you want to set the context for the conversation. Then you're confirming and expanding on these throughout the kickoff. So next is high touch and human-led. So give yourself the right amount of regular time with customers. Whilst your customer values outcomes, they also value the relationship and the partnership. The human-first mindset is important to ensuring that your customers don't feel like a commodity. And next one's build for the middle. So one of our customers described playbooks as the equivalent of a sales methodology for customer onboarding. So playbooks are a great way of creating this consistency and coaching the right behaviors in your team. But it's important to remember that not everyone's going to be a superstar within the team, just by definition. So your playbook should lift the medium players and these medium performers up a level, and having playbooks that only work for the high performers just isn't going to scale. Now, it's important to know what good looks like. So do your research into what a great onboarding experience should look like. What is the right timeline? How long should stuff take? From there, you can build out the playbook. The best way to understand this is to know who your customer is and what they expect. And like continuous value realization and customer success, you should also be tweaking your playbooks as you learn more. We can all get better by evolving and refining the process. And we've got automate to be human. So this one's inspired by Daft Punk. Simply put, investing in improvements in process and technology that helps you get time back. Automate as much of the admin as possible so that your team can be themselves and do a great job in working with your customers. Your time with the customer is the most important. This time with the customer is when you can make the biggest impact. So automate the time when you're not with your customers. Don't automate time with the customers, because that's the most important thing for you to do. And going back to the idea of being human-led. And finally, you may hear but we can't templatize our process. Like, this isn't one size fits all. If that really is true, and you're a product company, then you've got a big problem. Every company that we have encountered has some degree of consistency in the mechanics of setting up a new customer. A templated process doesn't mean that you do exactly the same thing for every single customer. That means that you take an approach that scales with and approach every single customer or every customer or similar customers in a similar way.
Cool. Awesome stuff, Andy. Looks like we've created a playbook for creating playbooks. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess we have, yeah.
Pretty much. Good. I love it. Cool. So let's talk about the impacts of these playbooks. So you may all be aware of some of the potential benefits from this, or in some cases you may not be as familiar with some of these things as we are. But let's share some insight into what we're talking about here. So if we go back to our definition, which was a scalable, repeatable, and profitable way to onboard customers, well, when we get that right, all of these things can happen. And I'd ask you to take a moment and reflect on when things go well in your own company. You may or may not think about some of the stuff on this page. From our perspective, though, all of these things are outcomes from having customer onboarding playbooks that are working. However, I think there's a couple of underappreciated impacts that I'd like to focus on. And the first one is revenue recognition or revenue realization. I was speaking with a tech business that had just closed a $3 million ARR deal. This was at actually the Dreamforce conference last year in San Francisco. And like many businesses, they do not recognize all of that revenue up front. There's a difference between book business and recognized revenue. And for them, they would recognize $250K a month from the point at which their customer went live. That was how their own accounting worked. Therefore, for every month that they were late, it was hurting them a lot. Now, the CS and onboarding team in many cases can have a direct impact on the financial performance of a company. And you should look to understand the economics of revenue recognition and realization for your own business. One of our customers reduced their time to value by 40%. So they increased the speed of what they delivered by 40%, and they made an additional $100 million a year as a result. So there's some significant opportunities there. Another one to highlight here, on the right-hand side of the page, hiring numbers are down. So hiring less, which might be a bit counterintuitive in some ways to when we're scaling, but with a scalable and repeatable process, you've got the ability to make better use of your existing team. The most effective companies that we see are able to scale with less people, and this reduces the pressure on hiring, which also has an impact on headcount costs and in turn profitability. And then the third one I'm going to highlight is just customer loyalty, right? So if you take a step back and you look at this in a different way, I would say, if you're looking for your customers to buy more things from you and you want to build up that customer loyalty quickly, and you want them to advocate on your behalf and all of those good things, which is how we think about loyalty, then they need to see success from their investment from you. And you are not going to get this repeat business if you do not start well. Right?
Cool. Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. I think when you've created a playbook for making playbooks, you've probably got one step too far on that one, but we'll move on quickly before people focus on it. So part 3 of the anatomy of a world-class customer onboarding structure. So our final topic of today, which is around capacity. It's in the title. So this might have been why some of you joined in the first place. So I actually led our research program into capacity, which had the involvement of more than 70 mid-market and enterprise tech firms and professional services companies, including IBM, NTT, Salesforce, WPP, among others. And we did this because we noticed this is fast becoming one of the most challenging issues for any companies that are trying to scale at the moment. It's a difficult topic for them to navigate. So we just wanted to explore the role of capacity and how that helps build this anatomy that we're talking about. So moving onto that.
Cool. Cheers, Robbie. So yeah, as Robbie said, this research program was across a wide range of companies, and it's looking at fundamentally the impact of capacity on both individuals, people, and companies. And I think, Andy, it's fair to say that capacity is not always well understood for many organizations, right?
Yeah, I think that's clear to say. So, I think this is absolutely important topic to many of our customers, but it's not always fully understood. So let's better define what we're talking about here. So these are some of the common things. So on the slide, we've got some of the common things that we hear from companies when they're talking about their capacity, when we ask them about it, or when we're doing our research, or we're talking to new prospects, or talking to our customers. It's often described in terms of the team's bandwidth. This could be like the number of customers that you have launching per month, or going live per month, or implementation starting within a month. Now, this practice falls down quite quickly when you start to have variation in your team's availability. For instance, when someone is on holiday or out of the office, variations in the complexity of the process itself. So if you might have variations in different customer segments, or you might be implementing different products and services across different types of customers, having these types of broad concepts of what our team can handle, or what our bandwidth is across the entire team, when you blend it in that way, then these capacity calculations become very unreliable. So Jonathan, like you've seen firsthand how some of the best companies think differently about capacity. So how are some of those companies using capacity as a metric?
Well, here we go. Right. So I think, the most forward-thinking companies that we work with have come to realize that to scale, they need the ability to flex their capacity to deal with the peaks and troughs of growth. And I think that's going to be true this year and next year more than ever. Now you can find some rather onerous literature or academic perspective on this topic, and we threw in this HBR quote as an illustration of that. Not that we've got anything against HBR, Harvard Business Review, some very smart people there. But in our view, when you dial this back, it comes down to your ability and the ability to take on work at scale. What are your thoughts on this, Andy?
Yeah, it's all about sort of taking, understanding that work that's sort of coming, that demand that's coming towards you, and saying, well, what team do we have available to? That is not just who do we have available, who's on. Like what bodies do we have, but do we have the right people? Do we have the right type of people, the right availability of people, the people in the right location with the right skills to be able to deliver the work that the demand that's coming into our team?
Yeah, great. I mean, I think the data from our research here is pretty interesting, because there's a few things here that we kind of use to inform our own business, but certainly I think many of the organizations that we talk to were stating that this is a key strategic issue. But why is that? And some of the things that we heard were, well, simply put, people are our most valuable asset. It doesn't matter if we're a product business or a services business, they are the most valuable part of our business. Or you'd hear things like customers very often see the similarity in our product feature set, so it's actually our people that are the differentiators. If we don't have capacity, we cannot start work. It's that simple. People are the largest cost base, and therefore it needs to be managed well. Or, again, for some products or technology businesses, professional services or your people might be bridging the feature gap for some of your customers. Now, the second data point here, so 15% feel they measure capacity well. So why are so few measuring it well? Well, going back to, I think one of the things that Andy talked about previously was that people aren't really able to define it as well as they would like. And the contrast here is, for us, very significant, right? So number one, it's a strategic importance. Number two, we don't measure it well. And then everyone in the study, though, says that it has a negative impact on people and their business. Now, there's a few triggers that you can watch out for in your own business if you aren't already experiencing this. So number one, your team is growing and people find that there's a big difference between managing capacity across a handful of people versus a team of 10 or more. And the symptoms will only magnify the larger your team gets. Another one would be that, the stuff that you're selling and in turn delivering is getting bigger and more complex, right? So maybe you're moving from the SMB to selling in mid-market or mid-market to enterprise. You've got more stakeholders, greater expectations, more complexity, et cetera, et cetera. Or you're just selling more stuff, right? You're selling more products and services, and there's variability to that. Very often, all of this stuff can happen at the same time as well. On the flip side, in terms of opportunity, when you get this right, it can be everything for how you scale with improved lead times. You can take on more work faster and at scale. People aren't overworked through this and many more. So what have we covered so far in this section on capacity? So we talked about, firstly, how not to define capacity, right? Also, how you should define it and why it's important. So here's a few very simple tips on how to get back more time. And you can actually access a lot of this stuff through our Agile Workforce research to see it in a bit more detail. But firstly, the best companies are planning for the unexpected. So never has that been more true than in today's current working environment, I think. Companies that are looking to take a more agile approach to customer onboarding are proactively building in wiggle room for changes, right? So that's that time for when stuff goes wrong, doesn't go to plan. The very best companies are looking to formalize this approach. For example, we always include a 10% contingency. Second piece here in the middle, workforce science. So this is the application of a more scientific approach to understand what skills and knowledge are being used and influence success. Because you can achieve better outcomes by matching the relevant skills and knowledge to projects and client needs. Imagine you've got a new customer and you've got two people that could potentially work with that customer. The customer's native language is French and one of your two people speaks French, but you don't know this and they don't get assigned to that work. And that's a super simple example, but it's meant to be, which is, your staff skills and knowledge have a direct bearing on their ability to help your customers realize value quicker. And then finally, going back to our Daft Punk theme, automate to be human. Actually, many moons ago, used to be a DJ, and Human After All was one of Daft Punk's albums, so that's how we squeezed this in here. But you can't automate human interactions, but you can get back time to have more impactful conversations with your customers. So automate the things that are inefficient so you can be spending your time in the right way, having that human-to-human conversation. And remember, throughout all of this, when you don't have capacity, cutting corners will not help you in the long term.
Great. So before we move on to your questions, and I think Jonathan's got some questions to add in as well, let's just wrap up with some of the conclusions of the pieces that we've discussed today.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'll probably pick up on a couple of points here. So, this people and culture piece, we put here, develop organizational muscle. So, this is something which does take work. And again, it's not going to happen overnight. So investing in the right things to help you get big and strong with people and culture at the heart of that is absolutely something that every company should be doing. I also think, though, that you have to have the time to do it. So it's kind of linked to that third piece around capacity, which is like, if you are always playing catch up, it's very difficult to invest the right amount of time in doing things better or helping people to develop or coaching them. And again, I think there's a link between getting that time back and the playbooks, right? Because the playbooks is a way to create scalable and repeatable processes for setting up clients or setting up customers. And so if you're doing that efficiently and you're not wasting time, you're getting that time back that can be redeployed or used elsewhere. Right? So all of these things dovetail together in our view. I mean, Andy, based on your experience, is there anything here that you'd want to really zero in on for people on the phone today?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's to, again, highlight that thread between all the different topics. So by specializing a team around onboarding rather than this being an aspect of a CSM's role or someone else's role is going to improve outcomes for the customer. So this is what the research showed. Those teams that had a dedicated onboarding team that had this specialization were reporting sort of much higher satisfaction with their onboarding process. Then that also leads into playbooks. So your playbook should guide the standard approach, but let the individual make decisions about what's appropriate in the context of their customer. And then I guess finally it's around customer success and customer success leaders taking the opportunity to showcase the true impact of onboarding and the positive influence that it has throughout all stages of the customer lifecycle. So this idea to focus on the first 90 days, not the last 90 days. So it's very easy to react to a customer that is looking to cancel in the last 90 days, but actually it's a lot easier and more effective to have a process or have an approach that makes that customer see that success earlier in their life cycle so that we don't have that struggle in the last 90 days.
Yeah, great. Cool. So I think just to point you, everyone on the phone, to a few resources that you'll find. We'll send out the links in the follow-up to this webinar. But from the customer onboarding survey, there's a very useful framework here. Maybe Andy, you could give us a little bit of guidance to kind of what we're showing here to people and how it can be used, in your view.
Sure. So when we're producing analysis for last year's survey, we identified this maturity gap between different customers, and we wanted to highlight that. And through that conversation internally, we came out with this framework. And so this maturity scale that we created from the research can help you identify where you sit now and what you can do across all of these different themes to step up. So we looked at the different things you can do around process and culture and people and collaboration and technology, and we try to define the different behavior that we see in how people kind of step up through these different stages of maturity across all of these different strands. And this is something that we're continuing in our research this year, with the focus of the survey allowing us to help you identify where you sit in this maturity scale in this journey to sort of having a more mature customer onboarding process.
Yeah, cool. Everyone on the phone, we will be you'll be getting a link actually to take part in this year's survey. So it'd be wonderful for those attending today and any colleagues to participate in the survey. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And again, we'll be sharing the results of that over the coming months, and we'll be hosting some other events following up on that as well. But no, I think this is a super simple framework that companies can use to kind of see how they evolve. So that's super cool. Thanks, Andy.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, Jonathan, Andy, and Adam, very much for that. And as Jonathan said, there's multiple ways to get involved in our 2020 survey. I'd really like to push that as well on today's call. It'd be great to have you all involved. So we're going to move on to our Q&A section. I've been receiving questions throughout, so thank you for anyone who supplied them, and please feel free to continue to ask them as we go through these questions. If you have any questions for anyone, particularly Jonathan and Andy around this, that'd be great. Jonathan's actually got a question for Adam to start with, though, to help frame some of this.
So Adam, I'd be really interested to understand, how does Gainsight think about the start of the customer success journey, where customer onboarding plays arguably a critical role?
So it's a great question, and I think onboarding is clearly a critical part of the lifetime of a customer, right? If you screw up onboarding, then you're behind the eight ball almost throughout the whole of the rest of the relationship. You're almost playing catch up. So, but for me, onboarding doesn't start when the contract is signed. I believe onboarding almost begins from the very first call in the pre-sales. It could be via an SDR who's making a call and trying to set up a meeting for an account executive. Why? Because we're setting expectations from that very first communication. If I think about and look at some of the reasons why, that causes customer dissatisfaction and ultimately churn, wrongly set expectations is key amongst that, where we're maybe overselling and under-delivering. So we need to make sure throughout the whole customer journey, even when they're still a prospect, we're absolutely synced up internally, and we've got very much a one team ethos approach. That doesn't just include post-sales teams like customer success, but pre-sales. Customers don't tend, when they deal with an organization, they don't think in the silo-based approach that we do internally. Internally we have sales teams, and inside those sales teams are micro organizations. Then we move across to post-sales. You might have an implementation team, a group specially responsible for getting customers to value quickly, and then they might get moved to a customer success manager, and then ultimately an account manager who might deal with the commercial ramifications behind a renewal and upsell opportunity. So it's all very siloed. Customers want just a seamless approach. So onboarding for me starts at the very beginning of the journey. And two key things that we need to find out during that pre-sale stage. One is, what is the value that you're looking to achieve from this solution? And you might say, well, that was just one question. But the answer for me is twofold, because one is, what short-term value do we want to get out of, of your first 3 months? So very often when we talk about implementation, we think about how technically we can onboard that customer. So how can we provision them? So for example, send them, the IDs and passwords and make sure our back office systems are set up. How can we train them to make sure they can log in? And that's all very important points. But that doesn't necessarily mean when a customer derives value. So what I'm looking at, and some key essential information in the pre-sale stage that I want to collect, is what does short-term value look like, and what does long-term value look like? Because customer success as a term is pretty subjective. What I call success and what you call success might be two very different things. We need to be really prescriptive about what that is. And then once we understand what it is, the first duty of the implementation manager or the customer success manager should just be to reconfirm with the customer what it is, and then come up with a program for how we're going to deliver it. And again, I just want to reiterate, an implementation should be about successfully helping your customer to derive short-term value, not just technically onboarding them.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's a lot of takeaways from that. Just a follow-up question. I think then Andy might have a question for you as well. We've talked today a lot about you referenced it right at the start, right? That shift from the transactional economy to a subscription economy. At Precursive, we hear a lot about the skills-based economy. How do you see the role of skills and knowledge changing, and the importance of it in the world of customer success?
Yeah, I think we've seen a real evolution in the world of customer success. I think originally the CSM role, the customer success manager role, was very much seen as a jack of all trades, a generalist, if you want, whereby, it wasn't necessarily that important to become an expert in your customers, or an expert in the industry that they sit in. I think we're at a different maturity point now. I think customers are quite rightly expecting that, the CSMs that they engage with, to have a high level of knowledge on many fronts. On obviously the company that they represent, I think that's a given. You have to be a subject matter expert in your product and everything behind it. You have to be a subject matter expert in your customer. So who they are. And when I say the customer, I don't just mean the amount of money that they pay you and when their renewal date is. No, I think it's multifaceted. I think you need to know about the personas, who are your user groups inside that business, and how are they all going to be different. I think you need to know about what's going on within their industry. I think you need to, what are the trends that are developing and how is it likely to shape their world in the future? You also need to understand you're probably not the only solution that your customer subscribes to. You're probably part of an ecosystem of third-party solutions that they will regularly access. So what's your position amongst them? Because one of the most important questions I think I ask any one of our organisation is, well, how important are we to you? Are we a can do without, which is obviously a huge risk? The can do withouts get churned almost immediately. A nice to have or essential we can't live without. What we're aiming for is for us all to be essential or can't live without. In order to really understand whether you are essential, you need to provide more than just product training. You need to be a consultant. So, one of the most essential skills that a CSM can have once they've got this knowledge of the customer, their industry, and also our own business is to meld all of that information together and really provide consultative skills to say not only how to use your solution, but most importantly, how it helps them get to what we often refer to as their desired outcome. So that's a very long way of answering, but the short answer is you can't afford to be a generalist anymore. To be a fully functioning CSM, you need to be an expert in all things your own product, all things the customer, and use consultative skills to meld those things together.
So Adam, something we spoke about was how we can enable CSMs to spend more time with their customer. What are the types of activities that you see getting in the way of the CSM spending more time with their customer and their customer outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, I think time management is an essential skill for any role, but particularly one in a customer success world. If you struggle with multitasking, potentially customer success might not be the right job move for you. Anyone who's done the role for a while will know one of the biggest battles is just siloed data. So when you come in for the day, what ideally you want is to be able to spend maybe 10, 15% of your day figuring out what your priorities should be, but spending 85, 90% of your day actioning it. However, what we find is sometimes it's flipped on its head, that you're having to, once you look at your CRM system, your product usage data, support systems, billing, contracts, and so on and so forth, you've easily spent a good few hours just trying to work out what to do. I think one of the reasons why Gainsight exists, or any of the providers in the CS tech space, is that, as I mentioned earlier, we want, the key thing is we want our users to focus in on actions, to focus in on those activities and tasks that we know are going to lead to productivity for our end customers. So bringing together of information and also the insights you can derive for it are key. So a great example might be product usage. You don't want to wait 3 or 4 months before you realize that usage has fallen off a cliff before you react to it. I mean, that's a lot of essential time gone. You want to be able to proactively be able to focus in on that customer and, more importantly, understand why. It could be you've been given a positive NPS score, which is fantastic, which is all well and good. But before we pat ourselves on the back too much, we might want to understand why. What drove that score? Did the customer achieve something they couldn't have done without your solution? Could they be part of an advocate program? I'm a huge believer in advocacy being one of the hallmarks of a winning customer success strategy. If you've got your customers who are willing to stand above the parapet and tell others about how great your service or solution is. So I think data aggregation is absolutely key, and then the insights you derive from that are really important as well. I think that would be the key thing in trying to stay the right side of being actionable as opposed to just being swamped in data.
Great, thanks, Adam. What I really liked about that was about what you said was the focus on how technology and the data can help enable these preemptive actions and enable you to focus on what's important for your customer.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Great. So we've had some questions on the Zoom meeting that have come in the last 5 minutes of the call. So we've got one here saying, do you have any suggestions for ramping new employees on a product suite of 6 or more products without overwhelming them? I think that's a really good question. Who wants to field that one?
Yeah, I'll take that, Robbie. So this is a great question. So I guess to unpack it, what we're looking at here is we've got 2 challenges, right? We've got a company offering quite a broad product set, so 6+ products, and also onboarding new employees onto those products. So So echoing some of the points that I talked about earlier in the session, I'd start with thinking about specialization. So first, sort of bringing new employees on to work across all 6 products or all 6+ products. That might be quite overwhelming. So bringing them on to start on 1 or 2, whilst existing employees are taking care of others, and then slowly building up that knowledge over time. I think that's probably one sensible approach to it. But as you're actually, in terms of how you build a playbook around those products, and how you actually make that playbook actionable, it's, you could look at how technology can support that. So this is what the Precursive product does. The Precursive OBX product allows you to take those playbooks and execute them for each customer and build playbooks for customers based on the products and services they've purchased. But as you build up those playbooks, it's about keeping it simple and, like we said earlier, building for the middle. So hopefully these employees these new joiners are able to understand the customer, and they've been hired with previous experience. So you can give them some latitude to actually work and make professional decisions themselves. But the playbook should be identifying those important milestones and activities and tasks that through the experience of your team, and that's kind of institutional experience of your team, that those are the things that are driving success for those customers, or they might just be things that functionally just need to happen to make sure that customer is actually successful.
I think we're losing you, Andy, on the signal there. It's very hard to hear you on that one. But I think there's a question here probably for Jonthan around the capacity side of things. So it comes with a statement. So isn't capacity really defined as having the capacity to onboard X amount of customers successfully a month, successfully being defined as a completed process that left the customer thrilled and able to move confidently towards implementation? But shouldn't successfully also have specific metrics that are easy to understand and track?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through all right?
You're fine.
Cool. So I think it's a good question. I think Michael asked this question. Again, you're absolutely right. The mistake that companies make, or that even individuals make, and I've heard people say this, is they're like, I can handle delivering, or I can handle dealing with, X number of new customers every month. And as Michael says, like, the question is kind of, can that be done actually successfully? Really, as we're thinking about capacity, it's not the volume, it's not the number of customers, it's the ability of your overall team to deliver an output. Because the amount of work that you're going to be able to deliver will have some degree of variance, depending on what you sell, the complexity of it, seasonality, everything else which is going on in the world right now is kind of an indication of that. So really, when we think about capacity, it's like, what is the individual and organizational ability to deliver those outcomes to your customers at scale? We're not thinking about it in terms of, we have the ability to do X number of clients per month. That will be a byproduct of, or an outcome of, your ability to successfully manage and flex your capacity over time. Ultimately, you do that, you'll be able to deliver and set up more and more clients at scale. It also links to the question that Carly asked around how many playbook variations are too many. So it was, should you have one for different sizes of accounts, different industries, etc. So I think really playbooks are really designed so you can create that kind of muscle memory, that repeatable, scalable approach to work. So if it makes sense to have a playbook that coaches the right types of behaviors and knowledge for your staff to operate across multiple industries, because the types of issues and challenges that they would deal with in those different industries are different, they're talked about in a different way, and therefore having a playbook that better arms your staff to engage with people within different industries, then I think that absolutely makes sense. I mean, we've seen some companies that have sell, hundreds, if not thousands of products. In some cases, that doesn't necessarily mean they have the same corresponding number of playbooks. I think it's a case of, can you have an overall setup of things that is going to allow your staff to operate at scale? And I think if you look at it through that lens, you should be able to pinpoint whether you've got too many playbooks or too few.
And just squeeze in, because there's still some people on the line, how would you build a scalable career growth plan for onboarding? What are the things that people in CO and CS need to consider?
Yeah, no, conscious that we're going over the time. I think, again, it's a good question. I don't, hopefully everyone can see the answer that I gave on the Slack channel. So I think, in terms of career plans, from my perspective, there's kind of two routes in a career plan. One is the route into that role. So what are the feeder mechanisms into an onboarding role? And then what are the roles that you could do coming out of an onboarding role, because it's unlikely that someone will stay in that job forever. So I think it's very feasible to think that people from, for example, support or could be one of the routes into the job. It could also be that some of the routes out of the job are into project management, professional services, or indeed customer success. I think that the types of skills and knowledge that you build as an onboarding manager are pretty significant, because you are at the coalface working with customers day in, day out, talking to them about their challenges, their processes, and how your tool or technology or service is going to help them to solve those problems. That's a powerful sort of set of baseline skills and knowledge and business acumen that you can learn there. So I think it's very reasonable to build out a career path that leads into bigger and better things, particularly in the world of customer success. I don't think you should expect anyone to stay in the onboarding job forever, because it is repetitive by its nature. So it's unlikely that people would want to stay doing that same job for a long period of time.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I think we're at time. So thank you all to the speakers. More round of applause for everyone there. And thanks, Andy and Adam as well, for all those insights. Just quickly before you go, reasons to be cheerful. I know the world's going to hell at the moment, but we have some things coming up that should be interesting, particularly for you guys on the call. So we're continuing our research around the customer onboarding benchmark survey. You can take that survey now. It's now live at precursive.com. You'll also get a link in the follow-up email with the recording to this webinar. And look out for, coming soon, the playbook for scaling SaaS with customer onboarding. So all of you in SaaS organizations specifically, we've worked with people like AppsFlyer, Box.com, and multiple others to pull together a playbook for what scaling SaaS companies need to be doing with their customer onboarding function. And obviously, if you've got any other questions about Precursive, who we are, what we do, feel free to reply to the email that we send afterwards, or reach out on our website. So thank you again to the speakers. Thank you for staying on the line for so long, and have a great afternoon or evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.